one of the greatest survivors of the Holocaust was the Klausenberger Rebbe Zatzal. He was a man that walked into Auschwitz with a wife and I believe it was 12 children, and he walked out of Auschwitz all by himself. He lost his wife and all 11 of his children, I believe, on the first day that they got to Auschwitz. One of his sons survived the war, only to die afterwards in the DP camps, shortly afterwards from some kind of an infection, and therefore he was all alone. He was a man whose amunah never left him, and his relation with HaKadosh Baruch Hu not only did not get weaker throughout all of this, it got stronger and stronger and stronger. It was the first Yom Kippur after the Holocaust was over. And he arranged that in the DP camp where they were, he was able to have a big room, and they were going to make a minyan, and they were going to have davening. And it was a very big deal. It was 2 or 3 years they'd been in Auschwitz, and these were maybe 1,000, 2,000 survivors. And many of them had abandoned their faith because of all the horrors that they went through. But everybody wanted, as Yom Kippur is coming, they wanted to celebrate Yom Kippur the best that they possibly could. It was Erev Yom Kippur. Now Rebbes have very lofty heights they go into as they prepare for a holiday. They have mikvah, they have kavanot that they have to have, they go into hisbodedus, they go by themselves, they start thinking about the whole year and all the tshuva that has to be done, and they think about Klal Yisrael. They have very, very lofty, high aspirations they want to accomplish even before the Yom Tov begins. And then when they get to that place on their spiritual plane, then they can go into the Yom Tov and they can go and take it to the next level. It's Erev Yom Kippur. And the Rebbe is now in the midst of his preparations. And he's going into the holiest of places. And suddenly there's a knock on his door. And he opens the door, and there is a teenage girl that is standing in front of him. And she says, Rebbe, she says, every year on Erev Yom Kippur, my father used to give me a bracha. There's a special blessing, I don't know if the Sfardim have as well, but by the Ashkenazim, the Hasidim, there's a very, very long blessing that a father gives to his children on Erev Yom Kippur. And she said, every year on Erev Yom Kippur, my most meaningful highlight was coming to my father, and he would put his hands on my head, and he would give me that special blessing. And she starts crying. She says, my father died in Auschwitz. My mother died in Auschwitz. I'm all by myself, Rebbe. She said, I have no one to give me a blessing. And then she asked the Rebbe, could you please give me a blessing? The Rebbe was a very emotional person. His heart was opened bigger than anybody could imagine. And the cries of this young girl who lost everything penetrated so deep into his heart. And so he took out a handkerchief and placed it on the head of the young girl. And then he put his hands over her head like this, and he gave her a bracha. The girl was crying. The Rebbe was crying. She ran out of the room thanking him profusely, and she told one of her friends, do you know what the Rebbe just did for me? He gave me a bracha, just like my father used to give. And the next thing the Rebbe knows, there's 80 to 100 teenage orphan girls standing in front of his room, all wanting a blessing from the Rebbe. Erev Yom Kippur, the Rebbe has a lot of holy things that he would like to do. But there's 100 broken souls that want his blessing. And he spent the rest of the day until it was time for Kol Nidre with his hands over the heads of 100 girls, blessing them in place of their father. And that's how the Rebbe got himself prepared for Yom Kippur. We think our holiness is doing holy things. It's mikvah, it's minyan, it's learning, it's davening, it's Kedusha, it's all the things. And it's true. That's a very big part of the life of a religious Jew, is doing the things that make us the religious people that we are. But you can't forget about your wife. You can't forget about what she needs. You can't forget about what's going on in her emotional world, in her world of anxiety, in her world of stress, in her world of tension. Just because your friend's wife doesn't care when he leaves the house at 6 o'clock in the morning and doesn't come home until dinner, she's superwoman, she can handle it, she gets the kids dressed, she takes them off to school, she picks them up, he's busy, he learns, he goes to davening, he goes to work, he comes home, dinner's on the table. Just because your friend's wife does that doesn't mean that your wife, number one, is going to do that or is supposed to do that. Hashem gave you your wife because she's your wife. And if you want to be a holy Jew, you have to understand who your wife actually is and give her the things that she needs. And if you do that and you take care of her and you're there for her, sometimes it's periods of time. She needs you around the house and it works out to be 2 months. 2 months, davening is spotty, the learning is spotty, but you're in charge of carpooling, you're in charge of this, in charge of that. But she sees how much you care about her and you're willing to sacrifice for her. At one point she's going to say, you know what, you want to go Mondays, Thursdays, you want to go back to Knisa? Go ahead. You want to go back to the Shir? Go ahead.